The next area we're going to be focusing on will be releasing the calf muscles. This is another area. The next area we're going to be focusing on will be releasing the calf muscles. This is another area that tends to be highly overcompensatory just based upon the fact that we're in general always really tight and restrictive on the front sides of our body. If we stand with that anterior pelvic shift like I was talking about before, because we skip that extension phase, what we'll tend to end up doing is sitting in this hip hyperextension constantly, and what that will typically do is put a great deal of our pressure when we're resting on the balls of our feet. And although this isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, it can be if you're always here and you never have learned how to rest on the balls of your feet, on the heels of your feet. This can be a problem if you're always here. And just in general, because we're always placing that demand on the calves, it's going to be a good thing to get into those calf tissues and create more hydration in them through the forms of some kind of a myofascial manipulation. So what we're going to do is get on top of this medicine ball over here next. I'm going to take my leg, put it on top of here. Then I'm going to bring my other leg on top of that to add weight. And then from there, I'm just going to begin to release the tissues right here of my calf. I typically, again, like to go high before I go low on the releases. So I'm going to start at the upper portions of the calves, and then I'm going to end up here at the lower portions of the calves when I do this release. So start up here. You can work outside, you can work into the middle, you can work inside. This is one where it differs greatly from individual to individual. Some people get a better response going right down the center. I generally tend to get a better response if I go right here on the outsides. And that's just based upon how my tibial anatomy is, how my femoral anatomy is. This is where my place of compensation tends to orient. So, but I've had people that also get great benefit going down the center or even a little bit more onto the insides of the calves. Some people, depending on some people tend to be more gastroc dominant, which is the upper portion of the calf, and while other people tend to be more soleus dominant, which is more the lower portion of the calf. What I would suggest for you to do is just, again, experiment. See which one ultimately hurts more to some degree. If this tends to hurt a little bit more right here at the lower calf, then you'll focus on that. If it hurts more on the upper calf, focus on that. And then what I always like to do is every time I do a release, what I'll do is I'll stand up, walk around, and see how I feel. So let's say I do this release right here on my calf, and then I'll get up to see what it feels like because I take a step. And the calf release is a really good one to gauge this with just simply because it's so close to the foot. But what I'll do is I'll release one portion of my calf, and then I'll stand up and I'll ask myself, does that feel better? And I do this with clients all the time. When I train them, I'll be like, okay, let me initiate a release, whatever, on your quad, your IT band, your calf. And then I'll say, stand up, how does that feel? And sometimes they'll say, you know, that feels kind of better, not really noticeable. But then there's other times where they'll be like, oh my God, something really changed in there. Wow, that feels a lot better. Or in rare instances, they'll be like, you know what, that doesn't feel as good. And then most of the time it's usually a neutral response, but you won't get like a negative response. And so what I'll typically typically look for is a significant change in the person's demeanor and their ability to move. And if I can notice that significant change, then I'm assuming I'm getting into a spot that's really inhibiting that person's motion. So going back to the release, just think about trying to develop your own scientific process, because that's kind of what I've done throughout all of this. I've kind of used my intuition, my instincts to some degree to figure out what area does need to be released, what area seems to need more contraction, what kind of release does it need. So for me, I've generally noticed that if I get on this outer portion of the calf, that's the one that gives me more rebound. So that's really what I go with. Now, are there reasons for that? Yes. How deeply do I want to elaborate on that? Not so much, because it'll take me a little while, but just in general, what guided me first was that feeling, the sensation of feeling more balance. And that's ultimately what's guided me through my entire career towards making good decisions when it comes to correcting imbalances. And I think everybody needs to occupy that space before they even think about assessing mechanics altogether. There's a gut feeling when it comes to biomechanics, and we need to start thinking about that gut feeling greatly. And this is a great technique to kind of start developing that gut instinct. If you need to stand up and feel it out and see, like, okay, what part of my calf which part of the relief on my calf feels better, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, just feel it out. Try thinking about, okay, what area am I releasing? That seems like it's nurturing, go with it, and then see where that goes as well. Anyway, let's move on to the next technique.